is Mission Impossible. It's supposed to be impossible. Now, I don't know if this is my favorite Mission Impossible of all time, but it's definitely top 3. And I would say, like, most of the people that went to go see this movie, and probably a good majority of the critics, this movie was absolutely fantastic. It kind of had just a little bit of everything for me. I really enjoyed the balance between the action and their narration, which I think this is a good callback to the Mission Impossible movies of the past. Like, the very first Mission Impossible was a much more narration-driven movie. Now, it still had its action, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot more narration in that movie that kind of drove the plot along. And later on in the series, we definitely had more movies that the action really drove the plot along, and there wasn't a whole lot of narration that drove it. And I think this movie kind of ties all that in together, and we get a nice balance between action that drives the plot and narration that drives the plot. And speaking of tying in the past, I really think this movie did a great job to tie in the previous movies into this movies. We see that there are moments in the past where Ethan Hunt had made decisions that kind of had led us to the moment and to where we are in this movie. And if it wasn't for those decisions that he made, we necessarily wouldn't be in this position. So they kind of did a great job in tying that in. They would jump in and they would explain how this decision and this moment from this movie ties into what's going on today. But then they just kind of, they say it, they give a little bit of an explanation, and then they just move on from it. They don't just sit there and over elaborate and spend too much time on it. They spend just enough time to tell how it connects and then move on from it. And there were parts of the past that I really thought that were going to be included in this movie that just weren't. There were characters that I thought were probably going to make an appearance in this movie, and they didn't. And really, I think that was the best decision. They didn't need to tie everything from the past into this movie. They didn't need to tie up every loose end from the past in this movie, but I think they did a good balance of bringing the characters and bringing situations from the past into this movie that tied into the story that they were trying to tell. And I think that they didn't just put stuff in for fan service or for fluff. Now, there are a couple fan servicey moments in it, don't get me wrong, but I think they did a good job in limiting that and just keeping the stuff that actually tied to the plot of this movie and helped furthering that plot along. And speaking of that plot, I thought this movie had a pretty good plot. They knew the story that they wanted to tell, and I think they did a great job in telling that story. And I think a good indicator of that is this movie was 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and it really only felt like 2 hours and 15 minutes to me. And I think that's because they knew the story they wanted to tell, they included the things that they needed to include to tell that story, and there wasn't much fluff or extra stuff that was going on that kind of just made the movie bloated. Now, I know that there are a lot of critics, I don't want to say a lot of critics, but there are several critics that thought this movie was just over bloated and just too full. And I really don't understand where that's coming from, because this movie just quickly moves along from point to point to point, and I don't really see where that bloat would come from, because everything was pretty much necessary to tell the story and move the plot forward. Now, in this movie, just like the last movie, the entity is the main villain. And there were other critics that just didn't like this. They thought that the villain was boring and uninspiring, and I couldn't have disagreed more with that. The entity is AI gone bad. AI just taking things and doing it on their own. And we're experiencing this somewhat on a much more smaller scale in our society today. We're seeing the AI and how it's affecting people and how people don't like it because it feels that it's taking things too far. And this just takes that up to the nth degree. And I think people can really relate to that, because that they can see that if AI continues down the path that it's going, we could get some form of the entity in the future. And I think people can really resonate with that because it's something that they're already dealing with in society today. Now, if this was done in the past, I don't know if people would have been able to relate to this villain that much. But I think because of today and the climate that we live in today, that people are much more able to just connect to this villain and understand how in today's society we could actually get this in the future. Now, I will say this, I am an AMC guy, so I see all my movies at the AMC theaters, and I watched this movie in Dolby, and let me tell you, that is the absolute best decision. If you have an AMC by you and you can go to a Dolby showing, I would highly recommend it. If you don't have an AMC by you or don't have Dolby, find another chain, whatever that may be, that may have a very similar type of a format, because the experience in the enhanced screen and the enhanced sound was just, it just like at your very core, like you could just feel this movie. Like there were parts where the vibrations that were happening in my chair because of what was going on screen just brought like extra depth to that scene and just drew you in and got you more engaged into that scene. So if you're able to go watch this movie in one of those formats, I highly encourage it. It's going to make this movie just infinitely better and you're not going to regret it. I know it's a bit more of a ticket price and it's a lot more expensive, but it's worth every single penny, especially for this movie. Now, I will say this movie is not a perfect movie. There are some flaws to it, but I think a lot of them are just kind of nitpicky. And one of those flaws that I hear people talking about is that the cast is getting old. And obviously, we know the cast is getting old. Tom Cruise is just not the man that he used to be. I think he's near 60 now, so he can't do the things that he used to do. Even though he does a fantastic job doing the stunts in this movie, you could definitely tell that he's lost a step. And you know what? That's why this series is coming to an end, because he's just getting old. He's not going to be able to do the same things that he did when he was younger. And that's just going to take away from the overall quality that these movies have brung and the stunts that they've been doing. And it's just not going to be the same. So I think it's part of what led into this being potentially the last movie in the Mission Impossible franchise, unless they go down and do a reboot. But again, a lot of the things that you could pick apart and say that this movie isn't and why it's not perfect are kind of just nitpicky things. Now let's talk about the critics. The critics, they just cannot agree on why they think this movie is bad. They're saying that there's either too much action, and then there's other ones that say there's too much narration. And if critics can't come together and agree on why this movie is bad, then you know what? The movie's not bad. See, if you want a movie that has more action, or if you want a movie that has more narration, those are choices that and things that you are expecting, not why a movie is bad. You may hope that it had that, but it doesn't mean that the movie's bad because it doesn't have that. Those are stylistic choices that you prefer. And when a movie is bad, people agree on why it's bad. Snow White, the remake, for example. People were in agreement, critics and moviegoers, they all agreed why that movie was terrible. Like they all had the same reasonings and the same points because the movie was bad. Now this one, I don't think the movie's not bad. And I think it's just the critics just complaining about some things that they just didn't like because that's not their personal style. And it's fine. You can have your personal style. There's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean the movie's bad because it didn't meet your stylistic choice. Now, one of the critics that I read had a blip that kind of touched on several of the points that I saw in some other critics. And it read that Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is the weakest of the 8-film franchise, with an unnecessarily complicated plot that lacks an emotional arc. It almost feels like they forgot what made previous films so great, the camaraderie of the team. All right, so let me start off with the unnecessary complicated plot. This plot was not unnecessarily complicated. It wasn't even complicated at all. There was a plot point from the very beginning on what they needed to do to get to the end of the movie. Now, that plot kind of fell apart at times in what they were trying to do, and they had to maneuver their way around it and find new ways to get there. But the plan was always the same. Like the plot always followed the same plan throughout the movie. It wasn't complicated. It was quite simple, actually, in my estimation. And so I don't understand where people are saying that this plot was just unnecessarily complicated, because the plot had a plan and it followed that plan from beginning to end. Now, they also talk about a lack of emotional arc. And now, I don't know how this movie lacks an emotional arc. Like, the literal plot of this movie is that if they don't come through, that there is going to be an annihilation of the entire Earth. There will be a nuclear holocaust as they're going to launch every nuke on the planet to destroy the entire Earth and wipe out all of humanity. Like, I don't know how the stakes could get any higher than that. So it definitely has emotional stakes. Now, it doesn't necessarily have emotional stakes that tie to one singular particular character in this movie, but there are definitely emotional stakes in this movie that are extremely high and extremely leave you on the edge of your seat. And to say that there is no camaraderie of the team in this movie is just stupid. Like, the entire team is together in this movie almost the entire movie. Now, there is one point in this movie where one character has to be separated from the rest of the group, and it's absolutely necessary. We knew this point was going to come from the previous movie, and it shouldn't have shocked anybody, but it was something that is absolutely necessary. It has to be done alone. Like, you're not going to be able to take the entire team to take care of this plot point. So there is one point, one character has to be separated, but the rest of the characters are all together. They're all interacting with each other. And in the final act of the movie, we get all the characters back together in one group again. So I don't know how they don't say that there's not any camaraderie with the team, because the team is mostly together almost the entire point of this movie. Then we have this gem that I've seen multiple times, and it says that this movie was way too unbelievable. Like, what are we talking about here? Way too unbelievable? The movie is Mission Impossible. It's supposed to be impossible. It's not mission, maybe we'll do it. It's not mission, we probably will get it done. It's not mission, well, it's kind of hard, but there's a path to getting this done. No, it's Mission Impossible. It's not supposed to get done. It's supposed to be impossible. Like, these are scenarios that in real life would absolutely never, ever, 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 ever happen, because they're just so over the top and impossible that they could never actually happen in real life. And that is what this entire franchise is built on, is taking scenarios that are way over the top and way impossible and making them possible, finding the way somehow, some way, our characters find a way to do the impossible. Like, that's the entire franchise. So to say that this movie was way too unbelievable is just a stupid take. And I just don't know why people would think that. Now, overall, I think this is a fantastic movie, and I think it's going to check a lot of the boxes when people go and see it in the theater. I think people are really going to enjoy it, and I think that is playing out in the ratings, that on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is at like 93%. So most of the people that are going to see this movie, who are moviegoers, are thoroughly enjoying this movie. Now, the critics have it at about 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it's like 7.3% on IMDb. So the critics don't like it as much, but I don't care about critics. I think they're a bit too hoity-toity and think too much of themselves at times. Not all of them, but there's a good few that do. So I don't necessarily take a critic score with a grain of salt. I think the audience score is what's most important, because that's what movies are made for. They're made for the audience. They're made for entertainment value, and this movie delivers in spades. It's highly entertaining, and moviegoers love it. Now, for me, I give this movie about a 9.5 out of 10.
Nice.
I think that this could very well be the best movie of the year. I know there's going to be several other movies that are coming later this summer that definitely could take that spot. I mean, we have the Jurassic Park coming in a little bit. We have the Superman movie. We have the Fantastic Four First Steps. There's the Avatar movie at the end of the year. So there's a lot of other movies that can claim that title. But I want to know, do you agree with me? Or am I just kind of off in left field, don't know what I'm talking about? If I am, let me know. That's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But I want to hear what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future movie reviews and movie trailer reviews. Just like this Friday when I give you my movie review of Karate Kid Legends. And since you're here, why don't you go check out this video right here. Now, I hope each and every one of you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.